So we're going to be in the last part of Hebrews 12 today. So verse 25. See to it that you do not reject the one who speaks. For if they did not escape when they rejected him who warned them on earth, even less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven. His voice shook the earth at that time, but now he has promised, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. This expression, yet once more, indicates the removal of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what is not shaken might remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful. By it we may serve God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. Now in the Amplified, verse 28 writes it even better. With let us therefore, receiving a kingdom that is firm and stable and cannot be shaken, offer to God pleasing service and acceptable worship with modesty and pious care and godly fear in awe. For our God is indeed a consuming fire. As we close the Hebrews 12 chapter this week, we're going to pull on what the author is really trying to drive us to. But in order to understand what the author is driving us to at the end of that final sentence of, for our God is a consuming fire, we have to sort of look back to history. Now, just after this letter was written, a guy called Marcion became the bishop or the pope, whichever term you want to use, for the East Minor Asia area. So that's Turkey all the way across. And what he did was he said the Old Testament is no longer relevant, and he created a new Bible with just bits of Luke and bits of the gospel messages. And from there, Marcionism ruled and reigned for about 200 to 300 years throughout Christianity, so he was the bishop of Turkey onwards. And what happened from there was a birth of hypergrace, shall we say, where God is no longer God, it's just Jesus, and it's all about just you now have an easier life. And that was the image they chose to worship. They cut and pasted, they cut out the bits of the Bible that he wanted to like, and that's what they then chose to believe and chose to worship. And that's something we see that still happens today. Now, it may not be as extreme as saying, no, we're only reading half of one book and bits of pieces of 10 of the letters. That's quite an extremity, but it's still what people believe today. And that's what the author is saying here, as he has taken us through that Hebrews 12 journey of reminding us of who God is, the God of Exodus. From God of Exodus, we're now presented with Zion, a God of peace, a God of righteousness, a God of restoration. It's in that closing statement a reminder, but remember, he is still a consuming fire. That in today's world, Christians really like to believe, or it becomes so easy to want to believe that God is here to serve you. But that's not the truth of what the Bible teaches us. The Bible teaches we're here to serve God. And that's why there's so much brokenness within the church. That's why there's so much brokenness within Christianity and churches, because people are still choosing what they want to believe. Now, when I started my journey with God, I remember it wasn't this Bible, it was the NIV in there. Let me get it. It's a good illustration. Good illustration. Good for illustration purposes. It was this one here with its many tabs now. And I remember when I first got it, it took a while to work out what Bible to get. I was like, which one? I remember I said, which one do I get? Because she was a Christian. I was a Catholic, so I didn't know what differences between Bibles. I said, what Bible do I get? Which is the best one to read? Thinking she would know. Like, you're a Christian, you must know. She's like, so I ended up getting this NIV one, and she was saying, no, it's got references and studies and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, well, we'll go for this one. And I remember it arrived, and I was like, yeah, not that bad. Maybe 3 months tops. And I said, yeah, with the study Bible, the study guide. And I looked and I said, you know what? I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue with what you say. If you,
That was a big thing for you.
yeah, it's a very big thing for me. I'm not going to prove you wrong. I'm not going to prove you right. I'm not going to debate. This thing is now right. I won't alter it. I won't debate with it. And I did. I read it first time through, and by the time I got to the end, I had a bit of a meltdown, and I said, what's the point in all of this? And I read it again, and then I was like, okay, I'm getting it now. And I keep reading it again and again and again. And it's why it's always beginning to end and end to beginning, and it's a non-stop journey of continual progress. But I said, I'm not going to negotiate with this book. Now, that's why the author of Hebrews reminds us of the God of Deuteronomy, the God of Exodus, because that's the God in the beginning. That's the God that they all knew. And then they've seen the salvation that comes through Christ, and it's then remembering not to forget that. And that's why it's so important for us today to remember there is two sides of God. Well, there's many sides of God, but there's two sides that he's revealed to humanity. He's revealed the truth of God without a redemptive sacrifice. So God without sacrifice is the God of Exodus. The all-consuming fire that covered a mountain, made Mount Sinai shake and tremble, that if any animal touched it, they were to be put to death. Consuming fire with lightning coming from the skies, that made the people fear and tremble, that made even Moses say, I cannot be in your presence. Anything unholy that touches God dies. That is the reality of God. But the other side of God is love that paid the sacrifice so you don't need to see that, which then gives you the opportunity to step into New Zion, which we spoke about last week, the new creation, that perfect holy city where, I'll bring us to it. If we backtrack to Isaiah chapter 11, a little bit of a backtrack, but this is sort of what our hope's in part built to. Simlan, can you read from verse 6 to 9? Isaiah 11, 6 to 9, please.
The wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf, the young lion, and the fattened calf will be together, and a child will lead them. The cow and the bear will graze, their young ones will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like cattle. An infant will play beside the cobra's pit, and a toddler will put his hand into a snake's den. They will not harm or destroy each other on my entire holy mountain, but the land will be as full of the knowledge of the Lord as the sea is filled with water.
Like, how cool is that? That's right. It's like you got a lion with a cow. You got no one is scared of snakes or lizards or spiders. You can literally go up to a lion and say, bro, I'm going to mess your head up. And there's a bear, big fat grizzly bear. I'm just going to go have a hug with a grizzly bear. Maybe play fetch with a wolf. Like, that's really cool. And that's the level of peace and tranquility which we are now able to enter. Like, maybe it's a sin. I'm not too sure, to be honest. But that thought for me is more glorious than the angels around the city worshiping God. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, Lord, but polar bear, but bear. Like, everyone thinks bears are cool, but they're really scary. But can you imagine like just jumping on the back of a bear and be like, what's up? That's so cool.
We have imagination of angels, but not this right.
Yeah.
So this is cool.
This is a reality that we're going to face. And that's because of what God did so we don't have to face the all-consuming fire. So when we're then looking at Hebrews 12, and that close, it's always remembering both parts of God are real. And it's not that God is bipolar. It's that is God. He is naturally an all-consuming, righteous, perfect being. His natural creation was polar bear next to seal. Now polar bears eat seal. Polar bears and penguins probably had some sort of hustle to do with ice. They're like them lions down there. They need a cup of ice. Let's hustle them for some ice. They probably work together, and the lions were probably then working with the chickens to do, well, then penguins want some grass. Let's work together to get them some grass. And they were swapping grass for ice. Who knows? But that was natural creation. Natural creation was everyone got on together. Children were not scared of things. Parents weren't scared snakes were going to bite children. That's how God naturally created it. But then when his creation disobeyed, so the author is reminding us that one day that will come back. And it's not going to be one mountain like it was in Exodus. It's the whole earth. Now it's in Haggai chapter 2 that he's referencing here. Sorry, we won't turn to it. You can read it in extra time if you want, but he's referencing Haggai chapter 2, which is then the new creation, the new Zion prophecy, which is still to be fulfilled. When God says, he literally says, he's saying to the people, who here saw the former glory of the temple? And there's people like, yeah, I did. I remember before the Babylonian exile, this temple was really nice. And the Torah says it was even better than it was as we saw it. And God says to them, don't worry. Don't lose faith. I am going to make it even better than it ever was. I'm going to restore my mountain even better than it ever was. But in that process, I'm going to shake the whole earth and heavens in making my new creation. So that's what Jews are still waiting for as well, because they have never re-had the success of King David and Solomon. They're still waiting for those days. So they're still waiting for Haggai 2 to be fulfilled. We're still waiting for Haggai 2 to be fulfilled, but we now know how it's going to be fulfilled. They're literally waiting for a man to turn up and be like, hey, I'm King David's son. Let's go conquer right now all of these Muslim, Philistine, Palestinian people, and let's take all of Jordan and our part of Saudi Arabia. We're going to take it all back. We're going to put a border around it, and God's going to make us the most successful nation in the world. That's what they believe. But they've missed the part of salvation, which is then throughout Isaiah and stuff. So when we remember that, we'll reread the Hebrews 12 again, because now that you've got that context set in your brain of remembering past God, new God, or past God without the blood of Jesus versus God with the blood of Jesus, we can start to understand some relevance for us today. So we'll go back to Hebrews chapter 12 as we build on what the author is saying here. See to it that you do not reject the one who speaks. Oh, sorry. Verse 25. See to it that you do not reject the one who speaks. Who's the one who speaks? Anyone? God, yes, thank you. For if they did not escape when they rejected him who warned them on earth, who rejected him on earth? Correct. The Jews. For if they did not escape, if the Jews did not escape when they rejected him who warned them on earth, even less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven. Now let's break that down. Because as we break this stuff down, it will start to give you understanding as to why the Christian world is as it is today. So what the author is reminding the people of, the time in Exodus, God took the Hebrew people out of Egypt. They went through, Red Sea parted. After the Red Sea, they moved the Wadi, the bitter water. People still complaining. From complaining, Mount Sinai. This is my ways, the 10 Commandments. And then the people rejected him. They didn't have faith to stand with him into the promised land. They rejected his word. They rejected his promise. They said, no, we can't do it. We don't believe you'll do it. We don't believe you can take down these people groups. We're scared. We wish we were still in Egypt and died. We don't have faith in you. Even though they saw the fire cloud, even though they had a literal presence of God walking with them, they rejected him. That's what the author's saying. They rejected him on earth. He was literally there, God as God on earth, and they rejected him. So what happened to them? They died. Yes, they all died. For 40 years, they then wandered the desert, and they all died apart from Joshua and Caleb, who were the only two who had faith in God. And that's what he's saying. If the people who saw God rejected him and they died on earth, how much worse is it going to be for those who reject him from heaven? For if they did not escape when they rejected him who warned them on earth, even less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven. And this is why Christianity is lukewarm today. Because that is so clear. That is so clear. When you line it up with the book of Acts, when you line it up with the teachings in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, when you line it up with how the disciples came to follow Jesus, it now makes sense. Because it was never, hey, just slowly, it's okay, just let Jesus in and just slowly. It was always a radical change. It wasn't, because if God's way was, it's okay, I get it, your faith isn't there yet, I'm going to slowly build you up, he would have let the people walk for 40 years in the desert. He said, no, you've rejected me. Because you've rejected me, that's it. And that's what the author is saying here. Because the true gospel of Jesus Christ, which isn't what's preached anymore today, is, hey, God is real. God's anger is real. And we are all going to face God's anger. If you do not want to face God's anger, he's given you a way out. He's paid for you. Even though he made you, he's paid for you. It's crazy. It's like, it's equivalent of me and Danielle made lemon drizzle cake yesterday, which I now spoiled apparently. I got told off very bad this morning because I spoiled the lemon drizzle cake. I put too much watery drizzle on top, so now it's a soggy lemon cake. It's the equivalent of me. I made the lemon drizzle cake and I'm now having to buy my own lemon drizzle cake back. Even though I bought the ingredients, I did the hard work for it, and I'm then going to have to go, okay, I'm now paying for my own lemon drizzle cake. It doesn't make any sense, right? But that's the equivalent of what God did. He made you. It's why he says he knows the numbers of hairs on your heads. If he cares about the sparrows, how much more is he going to care for you? It's why it says you're made in God's image. He made every single one of us. And he goes, these naughty children. But don't worry, it's okay. I will pay for them. So he paid for you again. And that's the gospel of Christ, that wrath, everyone, no exceptions, is going to face this. Everyone. Or instead of wrath, if you accept the voice, if you accept what Jesus did, you then don't see the wrath. You get met with God the Father. You get met by the mediator, the blood of Jesus. You get met by Jesus, who showed grace and mercy to the earth. But then there's a catch. And that's what people don't get. They just literally think it's, if you accept Jesus, that's enough. It's then understanding you don't turn away from him. Because it says, if we then turn away from him, if you turn to him, it means you walk with him. It means you go with him. And when you look at what he teaches and what he lives and what he expects, it's very different than what the world sees and does. And that's why church is dead. Because they don't preach the truth anymore. And that's our truth. And that's why he starts in that beginning of that verse with, see to it you do not reject the one who speaks. Do not reject Jesus, who still speaks to you today. He will speak to you, he will guide you, he will teach you, he will lead you, but you cannot reject him. You cannot reject him. Because the truth of the gospel is you change your life. You let go of the old, you let go of the world, and you embrace the new. In whatever way it is that he calls you to. Is that making sense so far? Now, the one thing that's really forgotten in today's world and in Christianity is fear of the Lord. That reverent, respectful fear of the Lord. And that's what the author pulls us back to for the last parts of chapter 12. So once you've understood what you've been saved from and who you've been saved for and who you now live for, you can then go, what next? Because there's always a what next. Realistically, if you were to go back to Exodus, God could have kept the Hebrew people in the desert and he could have said, okay, we'll just hang out here. You need quails, I'll bring you quails. You need water, it comes out the rock. You need bread, I bring bread from heaven. What more do you need? But God's journey is to step people into faith, to bring them into something deeper and harder than they ever could have imagined before. So like, for example, this morning, so I'm doing a course at the minute, a global course, and it has me doing Zooms at 11 p.m. I wake up at 3:30 a.m. So for me, a Zoom at 11 p.m. is not so good. So I've been going to bed at like 8 p.m. I'll sleep for 1-2 hours, wake up, do the Zoom. I'm now wide awake. I'll sleep again for 1-2 hours. I'm back up at 3, and then life goes on, full day again. So it's been a tough 10 weeks so far. Last night I go to bed. So Friday we finish prayer meeting. I set the alarm for 10:50. Get up, do the Zoom. Saturday I don't have a sleep in. Saturday I sleep in. There's no alarm. So last night I go to bed. I turn the alarm on. Ding, 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 ding. I get out. I get dressed. I come downstairs. I start praying. I'm praying. I go, okay, time to go Bible study and make coffee. I get up, I walk into the kitchen, I look at the clock, I'm like, why is it 11:40? What's good? I said, gosh, the cooker's broken. I need to buy a new cooker. Why is it 11:40? I go back, I say, let me check my phone. What happened? Why is it 11:40, God? Why is it 11:40? And God, that's when I then felt from God say, once the Zoom finishes, this continues. So it's a stepping into a next step of prayer, deeper prayer life. We've had seasons where we've done night watches and midnight prayers and stuff like this. And I'm like, oh. I was so looking forward. I've got 2 more weeks left. Yes, I go back to getting like 7 hours sleep. Oh no. What?
You're going to be waking up at 11 p.m. for prayers, and I'm going to be waking up at 2 a.m.
Yeah, so she's 2 a.m. So basically my alarm will wake everyone up at 11 p.m. her alarm's going to wake everyone up at 2 a.m. and then 3:30 a.m. my alarm wakes everyone back up again, and no one's going to sleep in this house. But it's stepping into deeper parts of faith, and especially with the new season us as a house is going into. Next, at the end of the year, I'm going away for about 3 months to be in Israel, Africa, and America, which, lovely, but my work pays the bills. So without my work, we pray. Simlan Lakshmi work for free now. But we're stepping into a newer season of faith. And it makes sense. It steps into having a deeper part of relying on God, not just spiritually, but then to start sustaining me physically. Because God knows to me, as long as I get like a block of 6 hours sleep, 5 hours minimum, I can survive for a long time. But doing this 2-3, I get very cranky. So God drives us into deeper parts of faith. Just when you think you've nailed it, great, we've parted the Red Sea. We're now walking for a few days. Oh, we need water, but this water is bitter. Okay, so they throw a stick in. Oh, good. They've now got faith for bitter water. Let's see what happens. Oh, there's now no water. What next? Rock, water comes out. Oh, that's even more faith, you know? And it's the journey with God. It's why it says you have to follow his voice, because Jesus will lead you into a deeper and deeper relationship with him, which requires obedience. And then this is where people go wrong. They then don't be obedient to him because they focus purely on grace. It's okay, we're bros. Jesus is my brother, we're bros. He's got my back. He knows. He knows I need to focus on whatever it is I need to focus on instead of him. But they forget these important parts. So when we remember this, it makes this last part start to make sense. And it's this last part that starts to set people free and start setting people into claiming being children of God. Because you see it in today's churches, and this is where I was trying to go with it before I got distracted. Throughout the Bible, the one thing we can say for sure is we now know lion and cow will eat grass together. But the other thing we know for sure is there's 24/7 worship around the throne room of God. There's 24/7 worship before God. And when you go back in history, not that long ago, 100 years ago, have you heard of the Salvation Army? So Salvation Army was an ancient, old, 100-year-old charismatic church movement. So they would be, in today's world, called a charismatic church. They did eventually, yeah. So the reason they were called the Salvation Army is because they were people that were saved by Jesus. They were people that were alcoholics, thieves, adulterers, whatever they was, bad people in England that were saved by Jesus, and they were saved from sin into holiness. And that's why they were called the Salvation Army, because they were saved. And they were an army of people that realized they were saved. And what they used to do was they'd all stand on the street corners and they'd worship God. And what would happen? An alcoholic would be walking by, hear the worship, boof, smacked like a club with the presence of God. Boof. And they'd stand up praising Jesus, and they were no longer an alcoholic. And that was very common in the late 1800s, early 1900s in the UK. And that's why they were called the Salvation Army. It's why even today, Salvation Army has the history of marching bands. But now they have a uniform and because back in the days when they started, the presence of God was so heavy in their worship that people who were demonic possessed would walk past, fall over, scream and squeal. Then the demon would be gone, and they'd stand up praising God because they were suddenly set free. And it's not because they did deliverance ministry. It's not because they did special prayers. It was because they worshipped. It was because they learned how to worship God. And it's not with, okay, it's in the chord of B minor, or no, you need to have a special guitar, but we definitely need a special guitar. Context of the story, I went to get my guitar strings changed. And I was just in the guitar shop and I was like, can I play with that guitar? And he went, yeah, okay. And I'm like, wow, this is like an anointed guitar. Like I'm playing chords. I'm like, wow, this is so nice. And I go to the guy, how much is this guitar? And he says, 20,000 dirhams. You can take it back now, put it back. I don't want to break it. That's ridiculous. And I said, gosh, what a nice guitar. Imagine one day. And he says, well, if you want, I'll put it by the side and you can buy it. And I said, no, I can't buy a 20,000 dirham guitar. He goes, we accept credit cards. You can do part payment. I said, absolutely not. If I came home with that, my wife will kill me. It's not a special guitar. It's not a special piano. It's not a special beatbox. It's not having a good voice. It's the truth of what it says here. So at the end of verse 28. So I'm just going to read it from the Amplified because they really build up on the Greek. Offer to God pleasing service and acceptable worship with modesty and pious care and godly fear and awe. So we look at this and go, what do we need to offer God now? We've accepted his voice. We've accepted what he said. We offer him service. We have to serve him in whatever way he calls us to. So some people, it's different things. It really is. And this is where it's understanding how the body works. Some people are called to do crazy things. Some people are called just to clean. Some people are called to have verbal diarrhea. Some people are called to bake. Some people are called to work with children. Some people are called to work with adults. Everyone is different. Some people are called to work. Some people are called to do finance, accounting. Everyone's different. Yeah, we actually had one mate, Lillian, she lived with us. And it was actually during her birthday. It was a long weekend. Everyone's on a timeout. I'm like, we haven't seen, it's on her birthday day. We haven't seen Lillian in 3 days. Did she die? Did she go out of her, because back then her room had 2 doors into the house and there was a back door entrance out. I was like, did she leave? Is she dead? What happened? There's no sound. My gosh. So we're eating her birthday cake. Then she comes out. Hi, Lillian.
Morning. I've been on the mountain for 3 days.
What are you talking about? I've been on the mountain praising for 3 days. You didn't even drink. You didn't leave your room for 3 days? No. She has a very intense prayer life. So some people are called to be huge prayer intercessor warriors. But it's pleasing service. It's about being pleasing servants. And this is where, everyone will pull on it a different way in our heartstrings. But for me, there's that one sentence when Jesus is giving a parable about service, and then when he comes as the master to check what the servant has done, and then he says this one sentence, well done, my good and faithful servant. And that for me is the phrase I look forward to hearing one day. Well done, my good and faithful servant. So everything I'm always doing is saying, Lord, I just want to serve you. I don't care how uncomfortable. I don't care. Even this morning I was praying, I don't care where you take me, what punishment I end up having to enjoy my physical body. What you've set me free from far outweighs whatever can happen to me in the world. Because I know what I used to live. I used to be tormented. I used to drink all the time. I used to care about drinking. All I think about was drinking. I used to be a secret smoker. I was so tormented in my mind. And Jesus set me free from it. So I know no matter what happens to this, it's never going to be worse than going back to how I was. So I just look forward to hearing that. And it's pleasing service. So when we're looking in our lives and as Christians and as churches, is actually what we're doing pleasing to God? Are we working to please God? Are we building church to please God? And we sat in on a church and we joined it, and it still breaks my heart because this pastor had a true, powerful testimony. Here in Dubai, most pastors earn a paycheck well above their CV status. Well above their CV status. But this guy was a pilot for Emirates. So that's over $1 million job they earn. Very high salaried. And he quit that to become a pastor. I'm like, wow, this is powerful. Like, Holy Spirit, we can do some stuff. This is really cool. But his church was a YouTube church. They'd meet, they'd sing one worship song, press play on YouTube, and this was it. And I said to him, why? Like, come on, man. Like, your testimony is so powerful, it breaks all the shackles that is destroyed by Christianity in Dubai, where it's just about pastors getting money, staff getting money. It's not about helping people. You're someone who's come from riches to rags for the gospel of Christ, not so you can press play on YouTube. Why? And then he said, Eloy, you don't understand. God's having me do church different. He's making me do a new church that's about pleasing people. Oh, what are you talking about? Well, that's the truth. It was a church, but then that's one here of many, where their focus is about keeping people happy. And that's the danger, because this slips in. I don't want to tangent too much. This slips in when people are dependent on if people come. Because if people don't come to churches, pastors don't have a salary. If they don't have a salary, how are they going to live? So they're focused on if people turn up. And these two will testify to this. If no one turns up to this church, we still continue. So there was a time when no one turned up. Okay, off we go. It's now 9:45 and we're going, and their whole family turns up about 10 o'clock. And we're ready deep in worship. You can join in. We're off. We're ready. We're ready, flowing in the Spirit. So we don't care if people turn up or not. We do, of course, we care. We care for people, but our priority is always God. So it's understanding that offering to God pleasing service is so important in whatever we do. It's in our work, it's in our life, it's in our marriage, it's in our motherhoods, it's in our pet ownership, it's in everything we do. It's saying, are we working in a way to please God? Are we serving in a way to please God? Because when you understand the sides of God, you'll naturally want to serve to please Him. Because yes, there is the fear. Oh no, I don't want to face the wrath. That's definitely there. And it's important that stays there. But the priority is love, because you realize He set you free from that punishment. So you serve Him from both sides of love and gratitude from what He set you free from. Also fear, because you're like, yeah, I've now recognized that fiery mountain over there is real, and I really don't want to see that. I want the polar bear cuddle. So when you have the two together, it's a very powerful combination. And that's what then leads us into the next part. Because when you have that deep core with God of, I'm scared of that, but I love that. It's like in a marriage. I'm scared of her complaining I haven't wiped the toilet seat, but I love her because she makes good lemon drizzle cake that I can spoil. So let me wipe the toilet seat. Let me remember to wipe the toilet seat. And if you've then forgotten to wipe the toilet seat, you run back and wipe the toilet seat because you forgot. Like, it's the combination of the two. When you have the combination of the two, you'll do things that just doesn't make. If I just had fear, it would be a very different relationship. But because there's two, it ends up with this thing called mutual respect. And that's what leads us into the next part. That when you have that foundation of reverent fear, but love and adoration, it allows for you to make acceptable worship. In order for worship to be acceptable, it means there is unacceptable worship. In order for worship to be acceptable, it means there's unacceptable worship. So it means you can do acts of worship that aren't accepted before God. So to come back to the Salvation Army, they had acceptable worship. Their worship was acceptable. Why? Because anyone that came into that presence of that worship, they changed. Yet there are so many Christian worship events when nothing happens. It looks good. The lights are there, the songs are there, it sounds good. But is it acceptable before God? Let's work out how. with modesty and pious care and godly fear and awe. Modesty, care, and godly fear and awe. So when we're worshiping God, it's not, I remember when I was a kid going to Catholic church, the hymn would come up, okay, this is the time I get to look, oh dear, my ceiling's cracked. Oh, please don't break. It's like the time you look around and you do this and you wait to sit down. Is it over yet? That was very much what it's like. It's like, I want to sit down now, In some churches, it's people looking around going, they're weird. Why are they doing this? Or that girl's weird, she's dancing. Well, that guitar's just really good. How's that piano still standing? She's really hitting it hard. It's not time for thoughts. It's not time that I've seen in worship where people are obviously trying to learn the guitar. They're watching and they're like, okay. And then they're doing this at the same time. And it's like, bro, you're worshiping, not learning how to, not playing mine guitar. But this is true. I've seen this all happen. The worship is an act. And we have to remember what that act is. Because for a lot of people, the time of worship is just, that's just that time before the preach. Or it's that time after the preach. It's that time before an altar call. It's that time before whatever. It's that time before we get to go home. Or it's okay, I can turn up late because I'm just going to miss worship. The main part's a sermon. Actually, I think before we met God, maybe that was something we even said. I don't know. But worship, you have to do it with modesty and pious care and godly fear and awe. Modesty. It's understanding you are never going to be better than an angel. You're never going to worship better than a heavenly being designed just to worship God. Now, there are angels that's role is just worship. So you can imagine, right? Everything God's made is perfect for what it designed it to be. You can only imagine what an angelic being whose design is worship is going to be like. It's going to be heavenly. So he doesn't need, I've always said this before, he doesn't need us to worship him. So that's why it's modest, because he's choosing to accept our worship. We're not good worshippers. Certainly not. We really are not. But he chooses to accept it. Why? Because we recognized it's not about what we can do. Because we know we're never going to deliver what's good enough. So just humbly coming before him and saying, Lord, I'm here just to worship you, to adore you. Jesus, take this time to just pour out my heart to you, pour out my offering to you. And that's why you do it with pious care. Now, pious is a very old word, but it's with delicate care. Because you're entering the presence of God when you worship. And you take that with care. You check your heart motive. Am I here to worship or am I here to repent? Because that's one way worship becomes unacceptable. If you're entering God's presence with a dirty heart, an unclean heart. Because that's where the fear and awe comes in. When you're worshiping God, you're getting into the throne room. Your spirit is entering the presence of God. You're ushering in the throne room into the environment you're in. It's why it says in the Psalms, he is seated on top of your praises. So when you make acceptable worship to God, he sits on top of it. Jesus sits on top of it when it's acceptable. And that's why you need to have fear and awe, because he won't sit where there's sin. Now, we're all sinners, but there's a difference between knowingly sinning and doing an accident. So much in today in modern Christian worship, it's not dealt with in that reverent respect that we are offering something to God, who is an all-consuming fire that can shake mountains. And one day he's going to shake the whole earth into destruction and the whole heavens to create a new creation. And we think today's world, especially here in the UAE, they worship the king. Sheikh Mohammed, they worship him. There's paintings and stuff of him everywhere, wherever he goes. There's an entourage. They make everything clean before him. That's just a fragment of how it should be for us as Christians when we choose to worship God. And we think, especially for British people, the Queen's coming around. If you know the Queen is coming out of her palace, they make everything in London spotless. And they did for the Jubilee. They polished out her golden chariot and all this nonsense. But it's within the British. If you know you're going to see the Queen, you make yourself look trim, you make yourself look proper. I've got to fix my posture, make sure my shoes are clean. You make yourself look spotless. And that's a human. When you're worshipping, you're now presenting yourself before God to give him your adoration. And we need to have the same heart motive. And it's then understanding that when we are worshipping here, and also when you're taking time outside of here to worship, it's not thinking, oh, I'm just going to worship you because I'm going to worship you. It's going, Lord, I want to worship you. I'm choosing to spend this time in adoration. I know I suck. I know I don't sing good. I don't play good, but it doesn't matter to him. I know you love me so much. You died for me. And I know you're going to accept my worship in my current broken condition. But I trust that in that worship, you're going to do something in me. And that's what we've seen. You know, we've never had music lessons. We've never had singing lessons. We still can't sing. We still can't play good. But we're a lot better than we was 3 years ago. A lot better than we was. Well, about 2.5 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I started playing the guitar. And Danielle about the same with the piano. But it only came from saying, Lord, I know I suck. I'm just giving you this gift. And even I said to Daniel, it was really cool on Friday's prayer meeting. That was the first time I was able to publicly, spontaneously worship while sticking to a strumming pattern, while sticking to a chord pattern and not need to look at the iPad. And that's not mine. That was Holy Spirit. That was God's teaching that brought me to that level. But that's something I always said, how do they do that? I don't understand. I still don't understand. I don't have to understand. Only God understands. When he then reminds us again, for our God is indeed a consuming fire. Now in our lives, our ministry, Danielle said, and God reminded her that this is not it. This house is not it. This is just the starting point of the vision God's given us. This probably in the grand scheme of the big vision is God has taken us out of bondage. We've now maybe got to the Red Sea, or maybe we've parted the Red Sea. Maybe we're at that part of our faith walk. She was saying to me, yeah, God reminded me, this isn't it. We're not to let go of the. And I was like, yeah, I know. God's already told me like recently. I know we're going a lot bigger than this. He said, why didn't you tell me? And I said, I don't know. I didn't. But for us, this is just the start. Because our vision is much bigger than this. It's a huge compound, a huge Christian complex with an actual cafeteria, an actual library, a properly set up worship room, properly set up prayer rooms, all alongside a fully functioning school for autistic kids, from which people will literally walk in and some kids will walk out healed the same day, which is fully funded, fully sponsored. We are free to pay good salaries to staff. We're free to have a feeding kitchen which people turn up to get fed. And that's going to be one of many homes being built. And as we remember where we're going, we have to remember always to sit in that remembrance of what Hebrews 12 teaches us. How important it is to be obedient to God in everything in our lives. Because that's not what's taught in today's world. Because the truth of Christianity is not you accept Jesus into your life. It's he chose to die for you. And because he chose to die for you, you now lovingly choose to serve him. It's not, Jesus, I chose to let you in. Now it's my terms. It's Jesus, your terms. I accept your terms. And when we accept his terms, we accept the journey that it comes with it. Being part of family, growing with family, accepting and embracing the discipline that will come from God. Through that discipline, he will increase your faith journey. And it's that constant reminder of obedience, obedience, obedience. Remembering what you've been saved from and why you've been saved from it. And if you always keep your eyes on that and remember, you're always going to stay humble. You're always going to stay meek. Because it's never going to be, I chose to let God save me. So I'm this big cool guy that now Jesus is my bro, he's my ally. It's like, no, God, I was so broken. I don't even know why you saved me. So as we go into worship, I want us to come at it today with awe, modesty, and reverence. That's just remembering this next time now is time where you're getting to enter the throne room of heaven. You get to pour out your dedication, and it's a time where either you're worshiping or you're letting him speak to you. But then it's remembering that what he speaks to you requires action. Because he does speak to us in times of worship. When he speaks to us, it requires us to sit on it, confirm it, and move on it. Any thoughts or questions? No? Super. So as this season closes on Hebrews 12,